Hey, before the video starts, I want to ask you guys, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to the channel, please go hit subscribe right now. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers. We might do a small giveaway once we get there. We'll kind of see as we go, but I really want to hit 1,000 subscribers pretty soon. We're doing really good. We're around 926 right now, so we're almost there. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Go hit subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Watch this video. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Rusty Nuts Media. Oh, hard video to make, man. Let's look at Gooch for a minute. We've done a couple things to him. We got a filter on the turbo, and that's about it. We got a little catching up to do, honestly. It's been about 3 weeks since I've told y'all what's happening with Gooch. Got some good news, got some bad news. So we'll do the good news first. We got Gooch to crank up. We got Gooch idling, we got Gooch running, we actually drove it. I had a couple issues just because it was kind of a bass tune. We're currently on the stock turbo. We're waiting on the exhaust manifold to come in for the larger turbo. So until then, we just threw the stock turbo back on just to kind of get a feel for the car, make sure everything's working as it should, and just kind of see what the car does with the stock turbo on it. So it ran fine. You know, we put the stock injectors in it and we put the stock turbo on just to get it cranked up, cruising around, doing a couple little checks here and there. Ran great, great. It needed a little bit of a better tune, a more defined tune on it, but other than that, it ran great. So, I swapped in some 1200cc injectors and called my tuner. I said, hey, let's put a little bass tune on for these 1200cc injectors. That way we can throw everything we can at the stock turbo and just take it to the dyno, take it to the track. Just absolutely max out this stock turbo while it's on the car. Just see what it can make, what it's capable of. Let's just go all out with the stock turbo to see what it does. So we did a little tuning here and there. After I swapped the injectors, we had a bit of a fueling issue. Car wouldn't run right. Anytime you gave it throttle, it would just die. It would lean out and die. No matter how much fuel we threw at it, no matter what we did with the spark, the same issue. We had a bit of an issue somewhere in the fuel system. The reason I know that is it ran perfectly fine, stock tune, stock injectors, stock turbo. The only thing we had changed was the injectors. Now, I bought these injectors from a guy, and he's a really nice guy, he's really cool. He had ran an E85, and he had pulled the injectors out, and they had sat for a couple months, and then I bought them and just threw them in my car. And we think the ethanol had dried up inside them and clogged them up really bad. So they weren't flowing at all. You know, it would idle for a little bit. It would idle okay. It didn't really need a lot of fuel to idle, but anytime you gave it any throttle, anytime it went under load, it would lean out and die. It's like they wouldn't flow enough just to move the car. So we had an issue there. So I pulled those out, and I just went ahead and ordered a new set of 1300 Fuel Injector Clinic FIC 1300cc injectors. I was like, a little bit bigger, brand new. Let's throw these things in there and see what it does. So I threw those in there. I'm having pretty much the same issue. You know, we got a tune on it. I talked to my tuner, we started tuning it. He was remotely tuning the car. I'd go to crank it up, it'd idle for about a minute, and then it would start kind of, that's pretty accurate too. That's exactly how it sounded. And then it would just lean out and die. Same thing. And the only thing I've changed is the injectors. Nothing else has changed since it was running perfectly fine. So I'm going over all my checks. I'm checking the fuel pump, the regulator, the fuel pressure, every line, make sure there's no kinks, make sure there's no leaks, make sure there's no clogs. I even pulled the inline fuel filter out, pulled that out just to make sure it wasn't clogged or anything like that. So I've just got a hollowed out filter inline right now just to make sure I'm getting all the fuel I can. When it does idle, the gauge on my fuel pressure regulator shows we have constant pressure. It does not ever drop. So I think as far as the fuel system from the tank to the regulator through the rail back to the tank is all good. It's holding pressure, it's not losing anything, it's working as it should, the pump's fine, blah, blah, blah. I think it's still gonna be a rail / injector / intake manifold issue in here. I think we might have either a bad O-ring, maybe not a good seal somewhere in there, and anytime we give it throttle, it's getting all that fuel from the injector and possibly sucking air somewhere around it. Gooch is having some drinking problems, I guess you could say. So looking at the car, it's ready to go. It's ready to be tuned. It's ready for the dyno. It's ready for the track. Only issue we're having is this stupid fuel issue. Other than that, everything works great. The power steering, the electric power steering that we've got mounted in the back, it's working great. The power steering delete we did up here, we took the pulley off, reversed the pulley. The belt works fine. Everything's working great. It's very well put together. I'm not bragging on myself, but it's a very well put together car. Only issue is a small fueling issue after I swap the injectors. So it's got to be something simple right up here. The battery relocate does great. Awesome job. The power steering, the electric power steering, we've got the high feed line, the low feed return line. The cage is great. The seats are mounted, they're reinforced, they don't move at all. The steering wheel, the gauges, everything works as it should, except this. So as soon as I fix this fueling issue, as soon as I get the car to where it can idle and I can touch the gas and I can move the car forward, I've got the tune on it for the 1300cc injectors right now. So it should be able to crank up and at least move around. Once I get it to that point, I can call my tuner back and say, hey, okay, we're good. We're not pulling in any air. We can try some boost leak tests and a couple other little tests to make sure we get a good seal on these things. But after we get that figured out, all we have to do is tune this car. We're gonna give it a 93 tune, a 93 octane tune, just so the car can drive around. We can test some things if we need to. We got a nice safe tune to rely on. And after we get a nice safe tune saved, I've already talked to the tuner. I've got some C16 laying around here somewhere, a couple gallons of that. We're gonna drain the 93 out of it, go full C16 in this thing, and whatever the stock turbo is gonna max out at, boost-wise, timing-wise, air to fuel, we're gonna lean it out. It's gonna be a dangerous, it's gonna be possibly the most power you can make on a stock turbo. I'd like to see somebody make more power than this one will, but I don't think anybody's gonna push it that far just because it's not really worth it. The max turbo can only do so much. The stock turbo can only do so much. It's gonna max out really low, maybe 25 PSI, if that, we don't know. We're gonna see what it does. As far as the motor goes, of course, we have fully built, forged, sleeved motor. We've got the head gasket, the studs, the ported and polished head. The valve train is completely done, the springs, we've got stage 3 cams. The fuel system is built front to back for whatever we want to throw at it. We've got 1300cc injectors, which are going to be enough because we're still running gasoline, not ethanol, so it doesn't need that much. So I think the 1300s will be okay. The car's ready. It's ready to go. The weather, on the other hand, it's been really sunny lately, but it's been like 187 degrees outside every day. So I'm going to start tearing this car apart up here at the front with the injectors, look into that and see if I can make sure I get these things sealed off all the way. That way we can hit the road, we can hit the track, we can hit the dyno, we can do what we want to do with the car. So I'll see you in a minute. All right, so I got the rail off, I've got the injectors out. I'm just gonna take a quick peek, make sure there's no gunk clogging anything up. At first glance, everything looks clean. There's no big chunks of anything blocking anything. Nothing obvious yet. So the injectors are still pretty much brand new. They don't even have 1 mile on them yet. A little bit of idle time, but that's about it. So as far as right here where it seats in the intake manifold, there were 3 of these that were still stuck in there so good, the rail actually just pulled straight off of them. So it was sealed much better at the bottom than it was at the top, with the exception of the one I'm holding. This one stayed in the rail and came right out of the intake. None of the O-rings are torn. There's no issues with those. I did take a small amount of WD-40 and wipe around the O-rings before I installed them to make sure they're not dry, they don't hang on anything, they don't tear. I mean, I took my time installing these things. I'm just really curious as to why they're not sealing as properly as they should. Now, I've seen a couple videos and I've searched a couple forums of how people actually get their injectors to make sure they're sealed and everything like that. Some people take an old O-ring, cut it in half, they'll put it on down here around bottom just to help it seal a little better. There's a couple little tricks you can do. Of course, you never want to use anything like silicone, any type of sealant or anything around the fuel system, the injectors, anything like that. You don't want to do any of that. Vaseline is something you could do around the O-rings just to help it seal there, slide in smoothly, all that kind of stuff. You definitely don't want them dry, all the way dry when you're installing them. But another thing is these injectors, there's a third O-ring. It's actually in here. And all these should be tight. If you take off this little silver piece up here, there's an O-ring in there. And the injector, it kind of looks like a straw, goes all the way through this middle piece. And you can see it moving around right there. It's just a little casing to help it seal right here. That's all that is. And we want to make sure they're all the way on that too, with no leaks or tears in those O-rings. You know, we want to make sure they're together as properly as they can be. I mean, they're sealed up pretty well, which they should be. They were brand new, so let's see if I can get one apart. So that's what it looks like with this piece off of it. This actually slides down over that. There's this little brown O-ring right here. We'll make sure that's good. I mean, it smells like fuel, but I'm sure that's from the gloves or something like that. I don't think any fuel would be leaking around that area, but make sure that goes back on smoothly. We don't tear anything, and you can hear it kind of click onto that O-ring. It doesn't click, it's more of a roll onto that O-ring right there. Now these up here, where it seats into the fuel rail, they do seem a little bit looser, like they've got a little bit more room than the rest of like this area up here or these inside here. We might want to try something with these down here. What I could do is just take a couple of really small O-rings and put, I don't want to rip this O-ring, I really don't want to rip it. I mean, I've got several extras for sure, but yeah, so the O-ring looks good. Right around here, you can actually get an O-ring the same diameter as that to where it'll fit on there, but just smaller in size. And it'll act kind of like a spacer underneath here. So you would put that smaller one on first, put this larger one over it, and it'll keep it from moving up and down like this to make sure there's no, you know, it's not sitting sideways inside this rail or anything like that. There's a couple things we can do to try and make sure these are completely sealed. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Probably add something real small right down in here, like another tiny O-ring, or cut an old one in half and put it in there, kind of double O-ring that right there, and make sure that just stays completely flush, completely flat, and all the way at the very top of this injector right here when we install it in. So it's not kinked or buckled or anything like that. make sure it sits all the way in there. I want it to be able to where I cannot pull these things out by hand. If I go to pull it off the motor, they should not come out of this rail at all. And I know these are gonna seal because they already have. You know, when I pulled the rail out, these stayed in there and I actually had to wiggle that O-ring to get it out. So these seal really good. The middle one seals really good. The only one I've got concerns about is how much room this one right here has to move around. And I mean, when you're pushing it in there, it's actually pushing that O-ring down away from the lip right there anyways. So I might try to add a small O-ring right in there. Like I said before, I'm just talking in circles now. Let's just get this thing done, shall we? All right, so looking at what I've got done, this is how the O-ring came right here. You can see that O-ring's got some room to move around. And I'm assuming when you push this, into the rail, it's gonna push that O-ring all the way down like that. So it's not gonna be sitting up here at this lip where it needs to be, which shouldn't really cause an issue, but we wanna make sure that's not gonna cause an issue. So what I've done is taken a couple old O-rings that I had, and I cut them in half. So I took a razor blade and I just kind of sliced right through the middle of it like that, real small. So I take that O-ring off, take that one off, and then I put this one on, just like that, to where it would kind of help seal, kind of like a double seal. And then I would put the full one on right there, and after I do that, that O-ring is sitting right there at the lip of that injector. We want to make sure it's at least tucked up under it like it needs to be. And then when you slide that into your rail, that's gonna be super tight. It's not gonna go anywhere, it's not gonna kink, it's not gonna sit down sideways, anything like that. So we will know that seal right there is gonna be completely solid. And we're not putting anything inside the injector. You do not wanna put anything inside. You don't wanna touch the tip. You don't wanna do anything like that. You just want to seal these. That's what these O-rings do. The one in here is good on all four of these. I think these down here on the bottom portion are solid. They don't really have too much room to move around. They were already sealed really well when I went to pull them out a minute ago. I'm gonna go ahead and do this to all four of these, stick them back in this rail, and see how that improves anything. All right, now if you look right here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but right there where it seats, with that one O-ring, it would be pushed all the way this way on the injector. And you can see that little half seat right there. Let's see if I can get focus on that. So that little half seat O-ring is right there sitting flush with this rail. So you know that other full O-ring that's on there is pressed all the way against the back of this fuel rail right here where it'll seat. So that's basically as far as it'll go in there. And then when we bolt this rail to the intake manifold, it's gonna pull this all the way down, and it's gonna make sure that let's get a focus going here, that injector is all the way compressed inside there. So before, that O-ring could actually be pushed this way, it could be sitting sideways, it could be possibly even kinked or wrinkled somewhere in there. So we know they're good now. We know inside the rail they're good. We know inside these little buckets or capsules, whatever you want to call them right here, those are good. And then down here at the very tip, we know those were good from just a minute ago. So I'm going to take some of my lubrication, I'm going to lube up right here around these O-rings also, and then set this thing back in the engine bay. Now I don't want to jump the gun or be a little premature here, but I'm already seeing kind of an improvement with that, just because before, when I would put these injector harnesses on right here, I could actually rotate this injector left and right like that. So I could kind of rotate my harness over and kind of lay them all over to hide the wires a little bit. But now they seem a lot sturdier in there. So hopefully that helped out a lot because they're not loose anymore. And it could have been that O-ring in there allowing it to move a little bit here and there. Also, the issue we were having was on our gauge here, we were reading solid fuel pressure. It never varied, it never dropped when we pushed the accelerator pedal. Nothing like that. If we went to move the car, it never dropped, it would stay where it was. And our air to fuel was leaning out whenever we would go to give it throttle. So what that means is whenever we give it throttle, we're getting air in with our gas that's not metered through the system here. So it's not really an injector issue, it's just an air issue. There's air coming in somewhere. So the fact that was solid and the air to fuel was lean, I think it was an air leak somewhere around here. Now, I don't want to jump the gun, like I said, so we're gonna see if we can crank this car and get it to idle. We're gonna prime it about 3 times just to make sure fuel gets up into the rail. Now if it does crank and idle, we're gonna go check the fuel pressure and see what it's sitting at also. I've actually got my foot just barely on the throttle right there, just trying to give it a little gas, and you could see it was leaning out and dying. So guys, reviewing the footage from just a second ago when we got it to crank up, it actually did idle a little bit better than it has before, so I think we might have ended up fixing a small air leak somewhere in there. But you can see, if I wasn't pressing the gas pedal, if I press the gas pedal at all, it'll lean out really far, run really rough. But at idle, when it started to adjust the fuel trims, it would start dumping fuel in there like crazy. So it got really richened up at idle. So I'm checking a couple other things just to see what I can do. I pulled my plugs out to see what I could see with those. Every one of them is pretty much fouled out of all 4 cylinders. So what I did, I went ahead and got my other box. I've got a couple boxes laying around. I pulled these out. I gapped them down to 0.025 just to check them out a little bit. So I've got these gapped. I'm about to drop these in there. I've already messaged my tuner. I'm talking to him right now, letting him know, hey, this is where we're at. I sent him the idle video. I also recorded the fuel pressure while I was revving it up, everything like that. I told him I'm gonna drop these new plugs in there, gapped it 25, and see where we need to go from there. I'm just waiting on him to message back and give me the okay. We should put these plugs in there and then try something. And before I crank it up again, I wanna make sure he's cool with it, just to make sure I'm not gonna mess anything up on his side. Guys, just a small tip here. You know, you hire a tuner to do a job. He doesn't have to do this, okay? That's his job. He can turn you down. Be nice to your tuners. You know, give them some time. back off a little bit. They've got lives too, just like you do. You're both on a completely different schedule. And like with this situation here, you know, I've got some issues on my end that has nothing to do with him. So if he starts remote tuning this car and we can't get it to run right, you know, that's my fault, technically. You know, there's something wrong on my end. I've got to get it fixed for him. His job is to tune the car, which is all computer. It's all adjustments. He can only do what he can do with what you give him. So guys, just take care of your tuners. If you're calling a tuner to get him to tune your car, make sure you're set up properly on your side. He's a really cool guy. He's been working with me. You know, I didn't know there was an issue here because it ran fine on stock injectors. It was just something after I swapped those out. Basically, it ran fine until I called him. I swapped the injectors, I called him and said, hey, I'm ready, and I have a different issue here now. So hopefully we've got that fixed. So I'm talking to him now. We're gonna see if we can finalize this tune for 93. And then once the 93 tune is done, we'll probably take a whole day, dump some C16 in there and start working real carefully with that and get this thing running as fast and as raw as we can get it with a stock turbo, just to see what it maxes out at. Just kind of a fun little side project until I get the manifold for the bigger turbo, and then we can turn it up to donkey tune or whatever you want to call it. So I'll check back with you in just a minute. All right, guys, my tuner just messaged me back. I've been piddling a little bit with the windshield up here, trying to get it ready. I think I'm gonna go ahead and put the windshield in today, tomorrow, sometime soon. Just because the exhaust is pretty much pointing directly at the passenger's face. So, just for a little added safety for passengers here, throw the windshield in. All right, so we've added a little more protection as far as or a little more sealing ability to the injectors. We've got the new spark plugs in, gapped at 25. Ugh. So I'm gonna go ahead and crank this thing up one time. He wants to check out the air to fuel ratio with everything brand new and working fine. So here we go. All right, I went ahead and shut it off there just because the car started to richen up a whole lot. As you can tell, that fired right up. Big improvement, huge improvement there. Idled fine, didn't need to give it any gas whatsoever. The reason I shut it off after it started richening up a whole lot, I didn't want to foul these plugs out. He just wanted to see it idle, so you know, once I cranked it up, the computer will kind of adjust the fuel tables a little bit. And it started dipping into a lot of fuel there. So I don't want to foul the plug, so I went ahead and shut it off. I'm gonna send him that video. Rude. And see what he says about it. So, be right back. All right, talking to the tuner, we're gonna pick a day, we're gonna pick a time to go ahead and tune the car now that it cranks right up and it'll actually run for a little bit. We can adjust the fuel tables, adjust the idle and all that kind of stuff to kind of get it where we want it as far as idling and move it around a little bit. We're gonna start working on it little bit by little bit, get it working right, make sure I can drive it, and then keep the laptop with me and keep a log open. That way he can watch it as I drive it, and then we can adjust and go from there. So I think for today, I'm pretty much done with the car. I'm gonna wait until I have an extra set of hands to put this windshield back in it. And of course I gotta clean it up really good. But as far as tuning and moving forward with track and dyno and stuff like that, now it's just getting a tune on it. Hopefully we got everything figured out. If not, you know, I'll let you know what's going on with it next time. But until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks guys, bye.